Hi guys, all right, so we are currently, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the dialysis tubing experiment, or demo. So before we get into what dialysis tubing is, let's go ahead and talk about the different solutions we're going to be using. We're going to have one solution that has glucose in it, and we can figure out if something has glucose in it by using a test strip. So these are our test strips. And if something does have glucose in it, the test strip is going to turn brown. If something doesn't have glucose in it, it'll stay blue. So for instance, this beaker does not have glucose in it. You can tell because the test strip is still blue. But this beaker does have glucose, even though it doesn't look any different. It does have glucose in it. We can tell because the test strip is brown. Okay. The other solution we're going to be using is going to be a starch solution. So we're just using the Stay-Flow starch. And you can see that they look ever so slightly different. But if there is no starch present, this time we're not going to use a test strip. We're going to use an iodine indicator. Okay, so watch what happens when I add the iodine indicator. Okay, so it turns like an orange color. Okay. If there is starch present, like this one here, watch what happens when I add the iodine indicator. It turns like a dark blue or black almost. Okay, so this does not have starch in it, and this does have starch in it. So what I went ahead and did is I took some dialysis tubing and I created a little sausage, little dialysis tubing sausage that contains both glucose and starch solutions in it. The beaker it's going to sit in contains just water. This is just water. I'm going to let it sit in there. So at first, this is what our solution looks like. Oops, focus, come on. Okay, you can see that we have water everywhere and only water in the beaker. Inside our dialysis tubing sausage, we have glucose and starch. Okay, so this is what we look like at first. Now, if I let that dialysis tubing sit in the water for a little bit of time, what it's going to end up looking like, you can see here. Here's the one that we have went ahead and let sit for about 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and test this with a glucose strip. And you can see that there is definitely glucose present in the water now. But if I test this with iodine, that no starch has gotten out into the water. Okay, so after about 20 minutes, this is what our starch starch and glucose sausage looks like. We've got water still everywhere. The starch has stayed inside of the sausage, and the glucose is the only thing that diffused out. So what does that mean? Well, the water is able to move back and forth across the membrane equally, okay, because the size of the dialysis tubing hasn't changed. The glucose was small enough to diffuse across the membrane and out into the beaker. That's why we were able to test sugar on the outside. And the starch was just too big to actually diffuse across the tubing, and so it's stuck inside the tubing itself.